Okay, AAT students, today's lesson is to solve a quadratic by factoring, but we're not going to use the AC method like we have done in the past. We're going to do it by guessing and checking. So we know that when we solve, we have to factor. That's one way to solve a quadratic. That's what we're doing today, we're factoring. So we know that we're basically going to get a product of two binomials. But how do we do it in a different way other than the AC method? Well, if I look at my A term, we'll start out with an easy one where the A value is 1. The only numbers that multiply to give me 1 are 1 times 1. And since there's an x squared, the only numbers that multiply to give me x squared are 1x times 1x. So I'm going to start with an x and an x in each parentheses because I know that x times x gives me my x squared. Now, my last two numbers have to multiply to give me negative 24, which is my c value. There's lots of numbers that multiply to give me negative 24. For example, 2, negative 12, 3, negative 8, 4, negative 6, even 1, negative 24. But those numbers also have to add to be my negative 5. Those are the ones that work, my 3 and my negative 8. So I can put a 3 and an 8. Since my 3 is positive and my 8 is negative, I can have it look like that. Now I've just factored it successfully because 3 times negative 8 is my negative 24. I know my x times x is my x squared. And if I do the middle term, 3x plus negative 8x is my negative 5x. Now I have to solve it. So if I'm going to solve, remember I said each factor equal to 0 using the zero product property. So x plus 3 equals 0 and x minus 8 equals 0. Solve each one, subtract 3 from both sides, add 8 to both sides. X equals 3 and, x equals negative 3 and positive 8. Okay, that's number 1. Let's look at problem number 2. Now, if you notice, my A value is a 2, so it's a little bit trickier. So what am I going to do? Well, this time when I make my parentheses, what times what equals 2x squared? Well, 2 is a prime number, so it's got to be 2 times 1. So instead of putting an x and an x here like I did in the first example, I'm going to put a 2x here and an x there because I know that 2x times x equals 2x squared. Next, what multiplies to give me negative 15? Now here's where it gets tricky because the a value is not 1 anymore. So I can think of, let's see, actually there's only two choices really. There's 1 and negative 15. And then there's 3 and negative 5. All right, now watch how it gets tricky. Let's say I'm going to try the 3 and the negative 5 option because usually the 1 and the number itself doesn't work. Not all the time, but usually it doesn't. So I'm going to put 3 here and negative 5 here. And I'm just going to hold off for a second. I'm going to pretend that that's plus 3 and that's negative 5. All right? So that could be the answer, but now I have to add to get that negative 7x in the middle. So here's where I have to do some mental math. Let's see. 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. 3 times 1 is 3. Negative 10 plus 3 is my negative 7. So I actually did that correctly on the first try. That's pretty lucky. That won't always happen. Let's say I didn't do that on the first try. Let's say I had, let's say I reversed the numbers. Let's say I had the negative 5 here and the positive 3 here. Well, negative 5 times 3 is still negative 15, so that's okay. But watch how it won't add up to negative 7x in the middle. 2 times 3 is 6. That's 6x. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. So 6 plus negative 5 is only positive 1, which doesn't match with this. So I would not try those Then maybe I would try to reverse the numbers. Let's do 3 and negative 5 like I had before. So then we have 2 times negative 5, which is negative 10. 3 times 1, which is 3. So then we would have our negative 7. So what I would do then is I would rewrite 2x plus 3 times x minus 5. And then I would solve it. Remember, I have to set each parentheses equal to 0. So I would have 2x plus 3 equals 0 and x minus 5 equals 0. Well, this would be 5 because all I would have to do is add 5 to both sides. But if I go over here, so this one, I'm going to have to do two things. For this one, I'm going to have to subtract 3. I'm going to actually move it over here so we can see it. Let's change colors. So I have 2x plus 3 equals 0. I would subtract 3 from both sides. 2x equals negative 3. And then I would divide both sides by 2. X equals negative 3 over 2 and 5. So there's my two answers there. Let's go on to problem number 3. All right, problem number 3. We have 4x squared plus 12x plus 9 equals 0. All right, so this time it's a little bit trickier because we have a 4. So we can use 4x and x, or we can use 2x and 2x. Again, I like to try not using 4 and 1 unless that's my only choice. So I'm going to try this, although I caution you it could be wrong. That's what the problem with guessing and checking is, doing it this way. You're wrong sometimes. So then we're going to go to 9. Okay, so our factors of 9. Now it's positive 9. So we could have, let's see, we could have 3 and 3. We could have 9 and 1. We could also have negative 3 and negative 3, but if you notice that b value is positive 12, so it's probably not going to be this one. Don't need any negatives there because everything's positive. So again, let's say I'm going to try 9 and 1. So I put a plus 9 there and a plus 1 there. Now let's see if that works. Well, we know that 2x times 2x is 4x squared. All right. Our inside term is 9 times 2, that's 18x. Our outside would be 2x times 1, which is 2x. So 18 plus 2 is 20. We want to get 12, so that's no good. All right, so let's try the 3's. So now I have 2 times 3, which is 6x. 3 times 2, which is another 6x. 6x plus 6x is my 12x, and that's what I want. So I can go right to 2x plus 3 times another 2x plus 3 equals 0. And then I set each part equal to 0, don't forget. And if I did that, 2x plus 3 equals 0. Actually, I'm only going to write it once because they're both the same. So I can subtract 3 from both sides. 2x equals negative 3 and divide by 2. That means x is negative 3 over 2. It only has one answer because both factors are the same. This would be if we were to graph this parabola, it would just touch the x-axis at negative 3 over 2 or negative 1 and 1/2 at the vertex. All right, finally, number 4. There is no b value. It's 0 because it's not there. What we used to do with this problem is, remember I said when the b value is 0, we used to add the 49 to both sides and then take the square root. Now, that only works when the x squared is by itself, which unfortunately this is not because there's a 4 with it. The other case would be we could add the 49 to both sides and then divide by 4. But 49 divided by 4 is not going to be an even number, so I wouldn't do that either. I'm still going to do guess and check, but this one's a little bit different. Now, this is a special one. When there's two terms and there's a difference, which means there's a minus sign, we check to see if both the terms are perfect squares. If they are perfect squares, we can do this very simply by taking the square root of both. So here, I know 49 is a perfect square because the square root of 49 is 7. All right, so we got that. And then if I look at the 4x squared, that's also a perfect square because number 4, the square root of that is 2, and I know the square root of x squared is just x. So actually, we're going to use, and I come back over here now, hold that thought. Since this is technically called the difference of perfect squares, and again, I know that because 49 is a perfect square and so is 4x squared. So when I go to my parentheses, I take the square root of both. Well, the square root of 4x squared is 2x. And that goes with what we've been doing before. 2x times 2x is 4x squared, so that part's good. And then if you look at the 49, the square root of 49 is 7. Now, whenever we take the square root, how many answers do we get? We get 2. What is the square root of 49, guys? It's positive 7 and negative 7. So it's positive 7 and negative 7 like that. Now I'm all set up, and if I don't believe that this way worked, I can check to see if the middle term is 0. Watch this. 2x times negative 7 is negative 14x. 7 times 2x is positive 14x. Negative 14x plus positive 14x is 0, and my b value is 0, so I did this correctly. 2x plus 7 equals 0, and 2x minus 7 equals 0. Let's solve. Subtract 7 and divide by 2. So negative 7 divided by 2. And then this one will be plus 7. And then divide by 2. So now I'm looking at 7 over 2. So x equals negative 7 over 2 and 7 over 2. And there you have it. That is solving quadratic equations using the guess and check method besides doing AC method. Please be ready with questions if you have any, and thank you so much for watching the video. Have a good night, guys.